Welcome back, friends, to It's Good to Catch Up, the podcast where I get to sit down with the fascinating people I've met through life and work and invite you to listen in and explore their journeys with me. I am your host, Jen Lorenzini. In the last episode, you were introduced to a top executive at one of the most trusted news brands in the world. Today, I get to introduce you to someone who has played a role in how we engage and delight in the technology that delivers media experiences to us. He is known as a trusted leader and visionary in the world of media and entertainment technology, my good friend, Paul Pastor. He has been at the forefront of shaping how storytelling comes to life through engaging content and ways for it to delight us as we consume it. Holding leadership roles at titans like the Walt Disney Company and Discovery Communications, now as the co-founder and chief business officer of quickplay, he and the team are revolutionizing how top-tier media companies deliver content in the streaming age, particularly with the innovative work they're doing in AI and short-form video. Get ready for some incredible insights into the future of entertainment, his views on leadership, career lessons learned along the way, and when to hire the divas. Grab your cup, listen in. It's good to catch up. Welcome, Paul Pastor, to It's Good to Catch Up. We're excited to have you on today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to give a little bit of background about yourself?
So I'm, as you already said, Paul Pastor, but I come to this conversation, you kind of being both a media and tech executive, right? Having worked at big companies like Disney and in strategy, research, media planning, data analytics, discovery, operating as like COO across our Discovery Science, Animal Planet, and Velocity channels. But then as tech entrepreneur, right? And kind of this very unique mix. To build some businesses, been successful in some, not in others, but we've landed on a great one with quickplay. Really thinking about the intersection of media and tech and how to actually drive capabilities through data product and tech platforms to help storytellers and studios and big businesses feel reach new consumers, right? And I come at it uniquely, right, with this both consumer lens and this business to business lens that kind of offers some different and interesting perspective, I hope, as I both engage with you, but also engage with our clients and engage with fellow leaders about the state of the industry and where it's headed.
Awesome. So you've had quite a storied career in media and entertainment. And if we go back, not to put a number on it, let's just say over the last 20 years, you've been able to be at the intersection and the acceleration of how content is consumed. However, when you first got into the business, it was a very linear opportunity. And you did some really great work as you were looking to expand the footprint, safe discovery, et cetera. However, you got into it at the juxtaposition of when streaming was coming on. What was it like back then to daydream about what was possible? Because it was before social media. Netflix was just kind of creeping out the door. You were part of that huge acquisition, with Hulu and such. What was it like to daydream back then?
Yeah, I mean, well, thank you for that. And it has been probably now 20 plus years, right? So probably I don't like to count all the years these days, but that's the way it is. Listen, I've been very fortunate to be at moments of intersection with transformation in media, right? I look coming out of business school and working on visual effects and looking at how with Technicolor in my career and looking at how visual effects were beginning to really transform and democratize almost what we could do within television and storytelling, right? And with I think some of the expression of that ultimately being seen through series, the HBO show, Dragons. What was the show called now? I can't remember. House of Dragons.
Friends.
Game of Thrones. There you go. With Game of Thrones, right? And you see this amazing expression of how the visual effects could be used. Then I moved to Disney, right? And my first project, right, when Bob Iger had said, hey, international is a key pillar of how we're going to reach consumers and grow the company. I come into Disney Channel International, where television penetration was nearly 20 to 30% in most of the European and most third-party markets outside the US, which had, nearly 85 to 90% penetration, which is kind of amazing. And we had to figure out how do we grow that footprint. And it was a time of what you wouldn't think was a big transformation, but it was moving from analog to digital television, DTT. And what we were able to do in looking at that transformation was say, hey, let's take Disney Channel from a paid TV environment, move it into a digital terrestrial television environment, ad supported environment, and help drive reach, right? What we did in Spain from 18% penetration in market to 100% penetration in market. Work in Russia to take something from 6% market penetration to 77% market penetration. right, through this transformational technology called DTT. And we did that in a number of other markets as well in Asia and Europe. And what that did, right, well, the reason we did this, right, not only because of Bob Iger's imperative, it was because we understood that Disney Channel was a great way for the company to tell about the rest of the IP that we were building, right? So it was not only about Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and My Friends Tigger and Pooh and Hannah Montana and High School Musical that were obviously these amazing properties that were sitting in Disney Channel, but it was the ability to actually say, hey, we have these new DVD releases. We have these new gaming releases. We have these new park attractions. We have all these new movies that are coming out, right? And the synergy we could show, right, through these correlations that we could literally raise the amount of Disney equity just through the penetration of Disney channels in those markets. So like that was one point of transformation. The next one, literally the day I get promoted to become vice president of strategy for the Walt Disney Company for also for Disney AIM Television under Ann Sweeney. The first day as a newly minted VP, they come to me and say, we have to make a decision. Should we invest in Hulu and license all of our content into the Hulu environment? Now, there's been many stories written over the battles that occurred inside, and I most certainly felt those some of the pain points of those battles. But it was a moment, again, where we leaned into streaming, aggregation, right? The new ad formats within the Hulu, new partnerships with NBCU and Fox, and really began to set the stage. I mean, look at how successful and how much equity value has been created out of this Hulu venture, right? Really set the stage for what was an ad-supported service then to a SVOD supported service to a premium service where you could skip ads to a DMVPD service. And that was all foundationally built from there. And then to be fortunate enough, right, to then sit this moment of intersection, and we'll talk probably more about it, right, when I left Discovery and really moved into like, how do we actually begin to think about the explosion of SVOD and AVOD services and fast channels and how we leaned into that from a platform perspective. And now today, some of the conversation built around the generational shift in viewing toward YouTube and TikTok and short form and how we're playing a role as a company to drive and support that transformational thing.
I have to tell you, I love that. That's fantastic. I have to tell you though, I never saw YouTube coming. I never thought that YouTube would be consumed the way it's consumed today. It's really interesting. So if we go back in time to that explosion, not only did you have what incredible investment, like a once in a lifetime opportunity when executives were writing the checks to do this investment as they were trying to beat each other out. Was there any concern around not only obviously you guys have this infusion of money to build out the technology? Were you at any point concerned about the quality of content that would be produced in order to differentiate different streaming services? I say that because if we go back in time and we look at that time frame, what an interesting time to be, because there was the other writer's strike. What was that, like 2008, 2009? It then created this onslaught of reality TV, which Discovery Networks is fantastic for acquiring as well.
Yes.
You had all of this incredible content that to me feels very American centric. However, you were able to translate that and bring that into international markets. Was it easier just to focus on the technology and not worry about the content that would deliver kind of that delightful experience, or were you always consumed with both?
Listen, I think that every media company today realizes that it's a function of both, right? And I especially talk about this often with shorts. And as we get more into that, right, what is your content strategy has to be married with a consumer experience that is engaging, that drives the adoption and fundamentally meets the expectations of consumers and what they tell us. But, I started on the Disney side. We're storytellers, right? That's fundamentally who we are. And we're storytellers that understood the core part of our business is to delight families and consumers and to be able to extract IP and let it sit across every single business unit, right? So that was how we thought about the business and then finding ways to drive that reach through all the different mechanisms we had as a company. But it's really interesting. I mean, there's some points where I look back. For example, as I've said, there are many stories told about Hulu. And one of the things that I think was very interesting, there was a moment where Jason Kyler had just left the company, who really was a driving force behind. And I believe if it wasn't for his leadership, we wouldn't have been successful. He had a lot of battles to fight with the media partners that were a function of it, but he really believed that the service should stand on its own and that it should have a very strong consumer value proposition and a very strong technology platform to be able to deliver that. Whereas if we had run it like a joint venture with the three media partners, we would have been sub-optimizing the consumer experience for our business models that we were in support of. So I think he really did an amazing job. But But as he left, there was a big strategic question. What is Hulu? Right. And I can remember sitting in the room and we're like, because we come from this very linear environment, we had this bias toward knowing what a brand stands for and knowing that it is what it delivers. So we knew ABC Family was for millennials. We knew Disney Channel was for kids and tweens. We knew that ABC was for adults, right, sitting in and generally in certain demographics. We understood the value of A&E and what it delivered and who their target consumer was. And there's this question about Hulu. You're like, okay, what is Hulu? Should it be narrow? Whereas, in fact, because of the role we were playing as aggregator, it needed to be broad, but leverage technology to become more narrow to the consumer that we were actually trying to satisfy. So those first moments of understanding what personalization could be, right? This was very early days in the personalization conversation, but that was a very big moment and shift in strategic thinking about a platform versus, let's say, a very traditional way in which Disney had launched networks in the past.
Did you anticipate the kind of binge watching that would start to arrive? Or was that a technologist's dream that there would be this ecosystem of binging?
Listen, I think that when we saw it from a research perspective, right, we knew consumers loved it. We knew that, like, I mean, we saw very quickly in our brand research studies that Netflix was rising to the top and from consumer satisfaction because of the binge watching capability. But it was a huge threat to our business model, right? I mean, you give it all away all at one time to it really, challenge the economics of how we built and how we thought about our businesses. I think today you see that now there's a mix of these things, right? As very for most streaming services like a Max or a Disney, they look at episode releases the same way they did in the television universe on a certain date. Netflix now has gotten into live content expanded where its content offering is right and looks at the occasional daily or weekly that will also drive value. Because what we understand about that is that it gets a consumer to stay on and become loyal and develop a habit. And that habit formation becomes extremely important in both consumer retention and engagement. So yeah, it was a big threat. It was a big threat. But ultimately, it seems like all business models got to stand on their own feet.
Yeah, I think for those of us who wanted to binge, we just waited a few weeks, right? Which
Yes,
probably
very
would
true.
disappoint those markets. And I,
But do you remember though, back in that time, we used to say the last 5 episodes were available. You basically couldn't watch anything beyond the last five, right? That was that, right?
I'm trying to think of a show that I was obsessed with that I could only get like one. I think it's going to sound so silly. It was Grimm. Like I was trying to find Grimm like on one of them, and I was
All
like,
right.
let me find this one here. And I was a new empty nester at that point. But yeah, that was like and now it's all there. It's all there, and it's so. I'm biased. Disney is my favorite app, but because it
Okay.
has the 6 different houses in it, Nat Geo, etc. You and I are around the same age, and we've talked about the I believe I invented the iPad in my head, or really kind of the UI in my head of remember we used to get like those HBO books and they'd have like it would be like the HBO catalog for the month that told you everything, but it had little pictures in it that, would say what each movie was. And I was like, I just want to click it. I just want to click it. And then it plays. I really wanted to click like the rated R so my parents didn't know I was watching it kind of a thing. But ironically, you can do that now. In the even in the 5 years we had work together and even on AI being introduced so fast and furious. What did you imagine as a kid that is now a basic UI?
I mean, I think I think about this often. This is the most stupid example, but I literally think about FaceTime and WhatsApp and this video Zoom calls and the fact that like when we watched the Jetsons, that seemed like that was so far off, right? Like why would somebody like have a video and you had to like get your, had remembered some of the characters had faces they would put on top of them when they weren't ready for a camera and otherwise. And now here we actually live it on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of funny and fun, kind of crazy. So I think about that and what television had the foresight to see. Robots, don't forget the robot was cleaning, so I think we're going to be there very shortly as well.
They pop at my house for.
It's all
I
coming.
just made her a woman, so I need to check myself. But I'm like, whoever that thing is, they could please come to my house first because. I'm not- so you're part of this big ecosystem, and I also know you to be incredibly aware of how to democratize kind of technology so that it doesn't just sit in the hands of the big companies that can afford it. Kind of shifting. What inspired you to do that? to leave these big houses of movies and entertainment and really find a way to create that technology to democratize it and bring it to the smaller kind of entities.
Listen, I absolutely loved my time at Disney and Discovery, and I loved the creators I got to work with every day. I mean, that was one of the most amazing things. The brands you were working with, the import of those brands to consumers. I mean, when you really think about it, like I could go to any party and talk about almost any of those brands, and people be like, "Oh, I love this or I love that," and there's this engagement that's wonderful. And who knows if my career one day later leads back there. But I will say, like, what I foundationally learned at Disney, right, was like, hey, really Disney focused on the future and its strategic position within the media landscape in that future continually, right? Disney's famous for its 5-year plan, but we would focus 10 to 20 years out. We were working on plans to go direct to consumer in 2011, right, with the board, and really, continually to refresh that and understanding of where we need to be. Discovery made me a better executive in terms of being, I would say, more nimble and more responsive to the quarterly demands, right? Because it was so exposed to the ad market that you had to be great all the time because the ad market was telling you whether or not you're going to hit your number, and you didn't have the diversification of revenues that sat across. But what I also found is that there's moments where we were moving almost too slow, right? And the universe, and you could see the universe developing around. And I wanted to be a part of it. But probably also had this own personal sense of like, I could do it maybe all on my own. I want to be one of those great entrepreneurs and let me like take the leap and take the jump. And did it with some phenomenal partners in some of the ventures. And in some respects, it landed on a position where I'm a part of that, right? Within quickplay and how we're doing that. But it was driven by that like sense of like destiny of like, doing something and building something great, understanding the frustrations of building a presentation that takes 250 versions of review, and to really say, hey, how can we go and just be responsive to the consumer and market need? Now, there's a lot of lessons learned out of, let's say, the ventures that didn't succeed, right? Like one is, when I will talk a little bit about Project Unite, which was really trying to create the Hulu of Europe. The lesson there, right, was that it might have been better to be part of somebody's venture arm and instead of trying to build it ourselves because of the connectivity into some of the business and the IP and having a position of strength within IP. But when I look at Stroom, right, and the development of this aggregation play built around the medium and long tail services and trying to basically create a bundling opportunity for these services and help gain shelf space. What I really learned, right, is that you need to be very focused, right, on what is your, product market fit, what is your cash position at all times, and being really, really clear on what MVP is and scope, and not allowing for a single bit of creep because it get back to that question of cash and product market fit, right? And so that discipline was something that was developed out of that I have now applied both of those lessons into quick play, and I think that's part of what we see as our success.
I was just talking to entrepreneur advisor that we were chatting about earlier, and I was talking to him about a business that I'm currently advising on, a new AI company. And he really kind of gave me some really humbling advice. And I think that you probably learned it in the meantime was don't worry about building the huge corporation. Focus on what's the differentiating factor that you think this might make? And at some point, it's okay to change that into just a white label product. If you're building out these big things, sometimes you're not ready for them, and to focus on those things. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did, kind of learning those little bits of like, hey, corralling people, corralling a new culture, corralling a new idea, corralling innovation. Sometimes it's too much to consume at the exact same time. But, just like a pancake, you can start with the first one and figure it out as you go along. And you did. I don't mean to say that they were pancakes or anything like
No,
that,
no,
but I mean,
understood.
I love that you continued at it, right? Because there were easy ways out. There was an easy way out at any point right now for you to have been brought back into those broadcast houses because they needed you. And you kind of stayed in this very focused area. I know on a mutual customer that we've worked on, the remarkable aspect of you doing on streaming platforms that don't charge, that you really are democratizing the access to even the technology to do it. Just kind of going back there, did you get into media and entertainment specifically?
I did. Um, I've I talk about this a few times, but I'll tell the story. I really think back like to sitting in my living room as a child and like watching Beverly Hills 90210 and be like, I'm gonna be in California someday. Like I'm gonna be there, right? And I remember watching Pedro in season 2 of Real World San Francisco, and seeing for the first time like a gay man really invited into our living rooms and having a conversation around it within my household, right? And me being LGBTQ, like I think that while it wasn't maybe that we weren't all ready for that conversation, it at least brought it into the living room for a discussion, which I think was some of the power of television. And so I've always been, and I also think that like there's always been these moments of community and sharing, right? You can look at whether that's Princess Di and her funeral or her wedding and her funeral, right? And then otherwise, there's moments where the world connects around the television, and I've always enjoyed that piece. So that's what drew me to television. And then I think there were certain people, and we'll talk a little bit about mentors maybe later, but certain people who really, I think, helped me realize my potential within the industry because of the passion and then this kind of strategic mindset and putting these things together that really helped carve a path for me in the industry itself.
Does your imagination keep you up at night?
Well, I mean, yes, it's going to get to, we'll get to it later, but you planted a seed in my head, which was like, what would be the title of your autobiography, right? And I think about, what do I think about at night? It is literally, my mind is like literally thinking about what is the next way? What is the next big thing? What is the next big transformation? And how do I play a role in that and fundamentally help seed it and then help nurture it and help grow it and help and fundamentally put it together with great people that you not only enjoy working with, but you value their expertise and their domains, their creativity, and putting that together. Like that's the thing that does keep me awake at night.
I love this because this is actually going to segue into what you're currently doing with quickplay, if we are okay to talk about it. Quickplay is focusing on the OTT transformation. Can you elaborate on what that means in practice and how quickplay helps its clients achieve it? Not everybody's going to understand what over the top means. OTT is over the top, which is typically a cable reference. But if you could explain it.
So to your point, what do we build? What do we do? What does quickplay do? Broadly and largely, right? We are building streaming services from the moment of content ingest, right? To the moment that it ends up in somebody's screen and everything in between. That's broadly what we do, right? For large tier one media and entertainment clients, sports rights holders, and broadcasters. That's the core of what we do, right? From a product standpoint. But it's really most of the time when we talk to clients, it's about that they are at this moment of transformation. And there are different points of transformation based on whether that client profile in that market and fundamentally what's occurring. But what we'll talk about here, right? For telco, it's moving from, I've been a traditional MVPD provider, right? I've essentially cable provider, right? Giving channels. I've now seen the universe includes many streaming services. How do I begin to bundle and aggregate my position as a biller and a bundler to be able to enable those markets, right? But then how do I also, I mean, that's like step number one, right? And now competing with the Amazons, et cetera, of the world. But then how do I also begin to think about fast channel offerings? So how do I think about even other points of aggregation and content offerings that I can be a part of to maintain that consumer, drive the greatest value extraction I can from that consumer, right? And fundamentally compete with other platforms. That's one, right? For a broadcaster, it's really interesting. They're going through a huge transformation because most of broadcasters start with some public service mission, right? It's not only driven out of making great content, it's actually driven out of a public service of driving information around local news and their communities that serve their number one purpose, whether that is a local broadcaster here and sitting in Miami where I sit, or whether that's sitting in the UK or in Madrid. They have a very similar purpose. And so for them, they're like, well, listen, we're losing reach. Our audience is getting older. What do we do? How do we address this? Does that mean distribution off of our own? Do we think about our own role as aggregator? How do we figure out collaborations the way that Hulu was originally structured, right? With Fox, ABC, and NBC. Are there market opportunities for us to draw attention and continue to deliver against that public service mission, right? It's really public service driven. And so it becomes all about reach, all about reaching new generations of audiences and maintaining that kind of local flavor and investment. And then sports rights holders, right? today with the amount of money that these people are paying for sports rights. It is literally not only how do I think about distribution, but how do I think about monetization? And how do I think about the extensions of that monetization that sit off of my platform? Whether that's gambling, whether that is, short form, whatever it might be, there's an imperative because of the cost of these rights. And so those are the three kind of use cases we generally see that we're in the process of helping enable.
Gosh, that actually reminds me. A future guest we'll have on is Devin Fox, who's the top producer over at NBC Sports Universal, formerly FSN Bay Area, that I worked at. And that was the number one profitable sports regional network. But I could see behind the scenes firsthand just the money to play the Giants games, the A's games, the Sharks, the Warriors, everything was just, they didn't have the rights to play the NFL because that's not on the cable. It wasn't then. ESPN wasn't doing that then. That's crazy. And I say that because even in the time since it's been 18 years since I've worked at a broadcast company, um, the revolution between social media being introduced as a mainstay and now betting. Betting is now like it used to be hands off. You could only have like Viagra commercials after a certain time because there were all these like timing of when things could be on air. And now there's gambling on all aspects. And I think for someone who grew up watching kind of Pete Rose, kind of like what are we doing with gambling these days? It's very confusing to me. So yeah,
There's been a significant amount of deregulation, right, in the industry, and medical commercials, otherwise, right. But I think we're also about to see probably another round, and then what that ultimately means is more M&A in the industry itself. So I think we're going to see even more transformation ahead in the landscape.
Love it. Last one around quickplay is we see AI and short form content being mentioned with quickplay lately, particularly around quickplay sports. How do you see AI transforming content creation, distribution, and consumption around sports, short form media?
Short form media, yeah. So, I mean, this is my favorite thing that we've done at quickplay in the last 5 years, and largely because, listen, I love what we do for our traditional business and the transformation to have a strategic conversation on where does the business head. But this is also, this is a moment where their teams are experiencing and they're seeing the same research, right? Gen Z spend 3 hours a day on YouTube and TikTok, 1 hour a day on traditional media. And they're just the tip of the iceberg, right? We all see it within our own consumption behaviors, how much time we spend on a TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Reels or otherwise in short form content. So there's an imperative. How do you think about addressing this audience, right? And importantly, not giving that audience up for the foreseeable future, right? Because you've just essentially let it all migrate into a YouTube or TikTok platform. So it becomes a conversation on both like audience, content strategies, and product strategies. And for me, like that's the home run. You're sitting into and engaging with all these pieces. So what we've done with Quick Play Shorts is we productize two components, right? One is how do you begin to think about creating short form content out of what you already have within your own assets? So that may be your library assets, right, or your newly produced television shows or movies, right, that sit in your library that are part of your catalog. That's number one. Number two, sports, live sports, and then number three, news, right, and what is also ephemeral. How do you take that, create a pipeline leveraging AI and rights management tools and a workflow to create velocity in publishing? Because ultimately in the social world, you have to be able to compete with a tonnage of short form content, but you also need to be able to produce relevant content, right, to a conversation. So what's amazing is about the tool that we developed is we tie it into Reddit feeds, into Google Trends, right, into sports blogs and otherwise to make sure that things that are trending are also being extracted from that library and being set up to produce and publish for third-party environments, first-party form. So this gives you a sense of like, how do I get, then now you're better monetizing because you're more relevant and you've gotten a ton more publishing capability out of it. So everybody who sits in the industry knows that every 3 months or 6 months, somebody comes in and says, I have a new target for you on cost. What we're doing is saying, listen, we can 2x, 3x, 4x the production output from the same team that you have and makes you more relevant all at the same time, which drives more monetization opportunities for first and third party publishing. That's amazing. And there's other use cases, whether that's marketing, whether that is discovery for content and what's available in service. The second piece we've developed is a front end SDK, which is literally a social forward experience. It is like, comment, share, highly personalized feed. So it's relevant content's being served to you. It is about the ability to follow. We even have influencer tools if you want to open it up to, like, let's say, a sportscaster or a broadcaster sitting
I love this.
within your network. It's amazing. But when you put this all together, and I will say the biggest challenge of the front end experience is that most media companies don't know how they should be competing with the YouTubes and TikToks of the world. To me, I say always start with building the engine. You can always publish that into third-party environments and YouTubes and TikToks and monetize immediately. As you refine what will be your strategic position in shorts on your own service. So for an MVPD, it may just be about discovery, letting Jen in a highly personalized feed understand that she has access to all these shows and let her know. I mean, one of the biggest challenges they have as aggregators is consumers don't even go into the services they already have access to because they're afraid of another subscription, right? So, hey, Jen, you're a Charter subscriber. Your Disney Plus subscription's included on an ad-supported basis because we've done that deal. So why don't you watch some of the Disney Plus content that you enjoy and love out of the 6 brands you were talking about, right? So that's a discovery vehicle and a retention vehicle. For others, it might be about publishing original short form content alongside shorts that are extracted from their library, alongside monetizing that with ads, right? And then obviously you have promotion that can all sit all within. That's the biggest challenge we face in the buying process. But overall, the last thing to hit on, and the most important piece of this gold, is all the data when you have a first party experience.
Love this. Yeah.
Because I get to see Jen interacted with this, took a comment, like, share. She's following this brand. She's following this show. She's following this actress. She's following, like she spent 10 seconds on this video, 30 seconds on the next one, 2 seconds on the next one. All of that tells me how to give you a better cold start, how to tell you what is recommended to you in your personalized 10-foot experience, how to actually retarget you when you are a lapsed viewer, how to target you from a CAC perspective, cost of acquisition, and importantly, even from an ad side. To me, it's a must, right? You've got to figure this out because of the data. You've got to figure this out because of the consumer trend, right? And you're just going to have to experiment along the way to continue to refine, but you got to be in this business. And it's super exciting.
So you just got me excited about a few areas. I'll ask about those, but the idea that you are cognizant about the people that might get left behind with the new technology. I love that you're bringing that up to these executives, that you're really looking to build technology to bring their team along for the ride or along for this journey and not being left behind and discouraged. I think that is one of the biggest issues I saw, in customer success was you'd have these executives kind of making these big decisions to invest in companies and they forgot to tell the managers or the people, hey, you're coming along for the ride and we have time to take training. They weren't doing all those things. I guess one of the things that makes me think is, could you use that same applications to universities and book publishers or I think of the newspaper. I think of my old SF Chronicle, and people being able to go in and comment on it. And you knew who was commenting on things, but now most of that stuff shut down because everybody's a troll. It's really nice. But I wonder if there would be an opportunity to have this mixed media ingestion in there, like something that would actually give you going back to really making sure that your news is local. It's not created in LA or New York or somewhere else. That I would love to see that, or even at universities. Like,
Yes.
like a lot of these courses, especially at Harvard right now, like they have these free courses. Like I wish in my heart's desire, that's the next evolution is that they pull in some of these universities in their teaching so that, look, we all know how many tacos Elise Myers had on that first date. I mean, her TikTok sensation went great. I love that. I love that experience of what kind of like takes off on social media. But more importantly, I'd love to have given myself a better opportunity to learn better as well. And I'd be curious to see, kind of if that's ever in your plan.
Listen, I think there's a ton of application of what we do into whether that's video podcasts like the one we're doing and changing that into short form. I think that is, there's any number of use cases. I always think going back to like maybe your example on news, the reality is that like a lot of people the demographic of somebody who's watching local news at this point is probably near 70, right? It doesn't mean that I don't care about what's happening in my local community, but I also don't want to watch 30 minutes. And I don't want to watch, and I actually probably don't care about all the, like, maybe I'm less interested in the crime or the human interest story, but I am interested in the top stories in my area, the big construction delays, the sports teams that are local, and the weather. So why don't you make sure what you can get in that short experience, right, is these quick 30-second vignettes that are personalized, and my feed is only showing me the things that are really relevant. I only get those 4 subject areas. I don't get the 5 and 6, right? Because you know me. And that's the future of news. That's how you drive relevancy into a Gen Z audience, or a Gen X audience, as I sit across the table. But that's how you begin to create relevancy and a habit, right? That's how you create a habit with your brand and that consumption experience. So I think it's critical that everybody get on this path, and it is part of a bigger transformation, right? This is not just about getting into shorts. It's literally, how do I set my business up for the future? And this is one of the tools that I have in that transformation story.
I love that. I want to get over to your leadership because I know you to be an amazing leader and a fantastic person overall. Part of the audience for this podcast is also young adults who are just getting into the work of understanding, and a lot of them aren't going into the office, so they don't get to have coffee chats with executives by chance in an elevator. You are the chief business officer at quickplay. What does a or what is a, because like they would hear acronyms like the CEO, or you're also a co-founder, or the CTO. Who should, there's going to be some folks watching you going like, I want to do what he does. And so what drives you every day, and what do you get to do in that role?
Yeah. So, so I'm one of 4 co-founders for Quick Play, right? I always like to talk about my founders. It's kind of funny, right? We have a CEO who's Norwegian, a CTO who is Chilean, a COO who's Indian, and then myself as an American. I think that diversity of perspectives really helps us. But we also, I say this, like, the wonderful thing is we each lean into our domain expertise and support each other in that way. So for me, as chief business officer in my role, I'm responsible for sales, solution engineering, which is essentially the more technical side of sales, the business development, so the partnerships that we had. That's how you and I get to know each other, through GCP and AWS and Microsoft and others. I oversee the marketing and publicity and communication strategy for the company. So those are the broad areas of responsibility. I absolutely love it. So I'll start by saying, like, the funny thing is I'm in sales now. And listen, I'm very fortunate. I have people underneath me who are much better salesmen than myself. But I fought being in sales because my dad was a salesman. He owns his own jewelry stores, and he was a salesman. That's how he defined himself. And he's absolutely brilliant at it. And he has some incredible stories about sales. But I decided, of course, I had to be counter to my father when I was younger, and I was going to be a strategist, a very high-minded strategist, right? So, and but as my friend Suzanne Rode, who I went to business school, said, at some point we're all in sales, Paul. And so I think that's very true. When you own a company, you're in sales. But I'm very fortunate. I absolutely love it, partly because of the engagement I get to have across the world with various people of different cultures, to get to sit and have a strategic conversation on the future of their business and the direction they are going and how we can support it. And that great team of people who I've been fortunate. Some of them I've worked with in the past. Some have been new that I've been fortunate to recruit, but it's been a very fun journey along the way.
That's right. You have some amazing divas on your team. As in,
Oh, absolutely,
they,
absolutely.
and I love every single one of them. I really, really do. What advice would you give, or what lessons have you learned around your approach to mergers and acquisitions and change in the workplace? Because you were part of so much of what was changing at the big media houses, and also with quick play, you have acquisitions of clients, you have letting go, or you may be looking at different business units, going back to that entrepreneur kind of advice of maybe you're just selling a white label. How do you kind of approach acquisitions and mergers?
Yeah. So in my prior roles, right, as a strategist, I worked on M&A activity. I do less of it now, though. As founders, we explore what might be adjacencies and where value creation can come from. So that part is always it's a fun strategic exercise. The realities of the world on the implementation side are that's always, it's they're complex. There are casualties. There needs to be a ton of empathy that sits across any acquisition. I will say, so like maybe a different version of your question though is that as I think about both as a leader and then as myself, right, is that one is you still have to believe in the mission of the company when you're a part of it. Like when you lose that moment of feeling that you are aligned with the mission, it's time to go because you're not going to be able to get up and you're not going to be able to put the smiley face on even though it's difficult. Um, the second piece is, I tell this to, and I've told this to peers, I tell this to everybody, is how a leader walks in the room sets a tone. So you have to like, you know what? We all walk in. Some days it's bad, right? Whether it's bad because of what you were dealing with at home, or last night I have a dog that didn't sleep and you're like, I am exhausted. And or you get on the phone on your first call of the day, somebody's just screaming at you for like no other reason, reasons you can't comprehend. You still have the responsibility to walk in a room as a leader and present the level of optimism around where the company is and what we could achieve. And that is not easy, but it's an obligation, I think.
It's hard to take it. I think what you and I both would realize is it's not personal, but damn it, it feels personal every day.
It does. It does. It most certainly does. It most certainly does. I think the third thing I tell my teams, right, is management for me is a journey too, right? So I'm not going to be perfect. And in the same way that we have reviews that are formal or informal, I'm open to the same, which is what is the support you need from me that I can give? Because maybe I think I'm delivering and I'm not. Maybe you need something else, and each individual needs something different. So I'm not perfect at it. I try to get better at it, but I'm definitely, it's going to be a roller coaster just like everybody else. And lastly, just speaking to these moments of transformation in industry, whether that's driven through, technological change or strategies or other pieces, is as you have a personal responsibility, not only to be up on all these trends and do the research and understand the technologies and embrace them but you have to be in the constant cycle of reinvention too. Um,
Well, that's
and I
wow.
really believe that, and I think that I've seen people not be able to do it, um, and you're like, wow, somebody got stuck, right? And listen, I've had my ups and downs in my career. Happy to talk about them, but what has served me well is that ability to bounce back and reinvent. And I think that that's an obligation, and at the pace of change that we see in the industry today, it's an imperative.
It's funny because my next question for you is how do you foster a culture of innovation and continuous learning with quick play? But I think you just answered it.
Hope so. Hope so.
I I think I too I wouldn't go back and change one day. There's nothing in my like we were just talking. I was talking to a girlfriend yesterday, and she was like, "If you could go back and change anything, would you?" And I'm like, "No, because I'm on this side of the story. I would only get here if I had taken that route. I'd love to apologize if I was funky. I'd love to receive some apologies too."
I'm right there with you. I wouldn't be the person sitting in front of you if it wasn't for those experiences. Would I have liked to have been maybe a kinder person in a moment, or a more collaborative person in a moment, or otherwise? Most certainly. To those people, I wish them well. And you try to the good thing about age and time is you do let it go.
Yeah, I let people know, like, there are so many people like, "Oh my gosh, Jen, you're the best," and then I'm sure there are other people like, "Oh, she's not on my Christmas card list." I like to remind people that we all have many different personas, right? We know marketing, we know how they target us. Obviously, we know personas, but the persona you met depends on the day and time and, the situation. If you met me at a 49er game or you met me trying to close a $10 million deal, those are two different people. They don't even order the same thing at Starbucks, let me tell you right now. She's two different people at this point.
I always find that the most difficult thing, I'll tell you right now, because I'm actually in the middle of a couple of negotiations, and I literally like to think by reputation and the person I like to present myself as a kind person and a reasonable person. But for some reason in a negotiation, I end up being like the hard ass, and I really hate that role. And it's more a matter of of just I'm trying to let my team play other roles. To your point, there's other personalities, so I want them to like manage the relationship, and I'll be the backstop to kind of really communicate like what we can and cannot do as a company from a commercial basis or or otherwise, right? And I hate that part of the process. It is a persona I have to wear, but it's not my favorite.
Yeah, I think I've told you I've started improv, which has been revolutionary for me, and I love it because it's a little bit more like therapy. I couldn't look people in the eye for the first series. I realized that direct eye contact was what I had been using for intimidation for a good decade. And so having to look at people in a non loving way was like weird. It was just, I mean, non family person. I was like, oh, I struggle with that. Being able to go in and disassociate from, some behaviors that we pick up as we're doing those different personas of negotiation. With mentorship, 'cause it sounds like you're also in a huge arc of mentorship right now as you've gotten to this, you are now in the C-suite. You do have an incredible amount of people who are looking up to you, watching you, mimicking you, wanting to be you, or wanting to achieve what you've been able to achieve. Knowing that you and I both have talked about mentorship being crucial and having someone to hot potato, or at least, when things are going wrong so that you can kind of guide them. How have you approached mentorship with your teams?
Sure. Um, maybe let me lean into the question first by saying, so I'm like talking about the mentors that I've had a bit,
Love it.
because they played a very important role. And one of, I have looked at it as like you having your own personal board. Corporations have boards to challenge the leaders of the organization. And I think you need a personal board that also does that. But you choose them for different reasons, right? You need different perspectives. You need different things that you also maybe look and admire out of them that you want that reminder of. So I've been lucky to have two that have been constant for the last almost 20 years. Rich Ross, who was previously the president of Disney Channels, went on to lead the studio and became the president of Endemol Shine, and then brought me over Discovery as president of Discovery Science and Planet Velocity Channels. He and I have had an incredible partnership, but he's the person who said to me one day, which I will always appreciate. He's like, Paul, you could compete on, sorry, but you could compete on your good looks. You could compete on your kindness. You could compete on your brains. You could compete on your socialness. He's like, but you're one of the rare breeds that can compete on all of them. So leverage your whole package, not just one attribute. And I will be forever grateful for that perspective. It's not that I always remember to do it, but I think that was really helpful. And he really mentored me into the industry, connected me with his mentor, Anne Sweeney, who I worked for a number of years, who also just showed tremendous, incredible leadership and the most powerful woman in Hollywood for a reason, and has created a path. He did a great job of also mentoring a number of other LGBTQ leaders in the industry that I think have had real impact in the storytelling that we have within the industry, and fundamentally the arc of LGBTQ rights that are a function of how people relate to television content and otherwise to develop those relationships. So that's one. A second is Ben Pine. Ben Pine was a global head of distribution for the Walt Disney Company, and I mean this sincerely. Like when my career is over, I hope they say the same things about me that they do of Ben Pine, because he's not only a wonderful, strategic, smart person, but he is giving of his time. He does everything with kindness. And he literally thinks about the community within his company, outside of his company, in terms of his interest in the arts, in the Cleveland Orchestra, his association with the high school, and still building that community. Like, he's a person who really thinks about community, but also thinks about kindness. And I think that is like I said, that's how I want to be remembered. If that's the thing that people say about me at the end, is this is a thought leader that was kind, that's a win. So Ben Pine is one of those people.
You can see that. It says, be silly, be honest, be kind behind me.
Yeah, right. It's so true. It's so, 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 so true. And he's a man who operates with incredible integrity. And then, what's so funny is that very recently, I'll mention his name, David Uli, who you worked with at Google. I reached out to him very recently, and because I think David Uli, beyond first of all probably being one of the most successful salespeople in cloud and hyperscalers, right? He's also a person who understands balance and mentorship, right? He does coaching. He went to Berkeley for coaching. He and his wife enjoy yoga and hikes and golf and tennis and all these things that really create a very well balanced human. That when you have a conversation with David, you could be talking about anything under the sun, and he's got the reach to be able to have that, right? But he's been absolutely phenomenal and also helping me with some of the refinement of my sales skills and sales leadership aspects, because I don't come from a sales background. I come from a strategy background. So how do I find those moments, right, to really help evaluate a deal? How do I find the moments to connect with a C-level executive and get their attention when you're sitting on the vendor side, right? He has been, and then how do I put all of that in context of what I want next? Which is where David always is, like helps you reframe. And I absolutely feel very lucky to have now him as a part of my my board and my team. So that's how I think about mentorship and how I built it. For me, I always tell my team, I just had two of my more junior people here in Miami for a week just to work closely together. And I told them, listen, once you're on my team, you're in my world for the rest of the times. Whatever you want to achieve out of life, if it is, hey, 3 years from now, you want to be at a different company, have a different experience. You want a big company experience versus or a consumer driven experience. I believe in helping you achieve. You've been gracious enough to give your time to me. I will be gracious enough, and you will always be part of my extended family to help you achieve those dreams. So I kind of approach the relationship that way. And then I spend a lot of time, and I think some of my team knows this. When I do, let's say, reviews of decks or reviews of when I was doing brand entertainment, we would do it as a whole so that we could all have comments. And again, I'm not perfect, so everybody could feed in, but also so they could see my lens, right? And I think that's a very important process to bring people in and be like, hey, let me help you see the lens, because otherwise you're just downstream from it and you're not really understanding the context of that decision, why you made an edit, why you thought the brand should be better, differently positioned, why I obsess over bullets on a page and how they are formatted and where they sit. But all those things are really important that I think you are a responsibility of bringing more junior people into the conversation so they can see, observe, own the story themselves, and have context so they become better executives over time.
I love that. I don't know if you know this, but at my decade at Visa we did board reports because I was chief of staff to the SVP of emerging products, but I actually got my start off in ethics. And so you'd have to do those board reports. And so Karen Griffin, who is at MasterCard, I think she's their chief risk officer, is also one of my mentors. It was PowerPoint drill sergeant. Like because she was like, look, this matters. These executives will get distracted when they come in and things aren't formatted. And you're like, I never thought of that. She's like, I am. I love and
Because even the executive is distracted by it. You're like, why is that
yeah.
important?
Yeah. She won't
You
think
know?
she knows if it wasn't lined up. She was amazing. Or even when Raj would have to go through mine because this is when we were developing Apple Pay and we were getting gobs of money from the board. And so they would like to see these weekly updates. And I had to refine it so fast. I think before that, I wouldn't have understood why. I thought Karen knows this, and so I love you, Karen, if you're listening. We thought she was crazy. We did. We are like, why is she so crazy? Until we saw her get called out for something that happened, and you're like, I never want that to happen to her again. That's that's uncool. So I get that. Do you encourage your team members to also be mentors and to make time for mentorship in their kind of daily schedules, or has that kind of come across part of your leadership approach?
It's an interesting question. I don't know if I actually explicitly say it, but one of the things that I've been very proud of as a part of quickplay, right, is we've sponsored a number of LGBTQ events. We've sponsored various women in tech leadership, both prominence of some of our more impactful women leaders, but also events, because I want people to understand that that is about mentorship. It is about creating community. It is about creating paths. So maybe in the implicit and not as explicit, but it remains really important.
Love that. Going to round this one out. So, given your background in media, how do you see technology impacting societal engagement and the way people connect with information and entertainment? We are currently in a loneliness epidemic. Do you think about building products that right now you're building products that, that are around screens? Do you think you'll ever kind of go back to engaging or creating pathways that get to in real life, back to IRL?
Listen, I think there's a number of companies that have shown that in real life, right, experiential services and even travel and otherwise are exploding because people are looking for more contact. But I think your question gets at something really interesting. And I had at a interview this month with streaming media around Pride a month. And one of the questions they asked me about was personalization. And so taking the story back where I said, listen, I got into media because of the shared community experience, even the conversations in the living room built around a gay character. And my big fear for media today is that it becomes so siloed. And that we end up with what you see as these results, right? Whether are the interference in our elections or people buying them. It is the unshared experience in terms of an event or a show and losing that conversation. It's the potentially siloing where somebody doesn't see a gay character in any of their media, right? And over time, that reduces the understanding that's been a huge piece of how rights have been achieved. So I'm very concerned that the siloization of media will have tremendous societal impact. I don't know the answer to it because I sell personalization too, and I understand its value to a consumer and to a brand and to engagement and to monetization. But we do need to find those moments, right, where we connect. And I think that, and I fear for that we're losing.
I wish that the next product that you have involved comes to being on screen, but maybe being able to watch it as a community so you can start to talk to people and break, because I think that's also the biggest issue. You can throw everybody back into IRL. People don't know how to break the ice anymore. I say that as a mother of somebody in that age group that I'm like, oh, it's happening. He's like, why do you talk to all the strangers in line? I'm like, how do you not talk to all the strangers in line? He's like, so I think we just all have like a different experience of how we're kind of going around things. All right.
It's interesting though, at the same time, I'll say I was with my nieces this weekend and like my nieces do their homework with the kids on the phone together and then they move from room to room and they keep chatting. So there's some level of connectivity. I don't know if the endorphins run the same or if the more the empathy exists when you sit in these kind of more virtual environments, right? I would love to see some of the social studies around that because I think that there's gotta be some impact.
Yeah, you're less of a keyboard warrior. You wouldn't say that if you could actually see the expression on someone's face, right? Or unless you catch me on one of those other personas and I'm angry, then I'm like, oh, can't wait to tell you this. All right. Well, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Yeah. Listen, I think that like at the very end of the day, I'm a person who still wish I had like more empathy and kindness, without a doubt. I think those are, while some strong suits of mine, I think I could still be better at it. But if I had to have a real superpower, I mean, I'd love to see in the future and be the person who's building the toys and the tools and the things that get, that enable it. Right. So, and maybe have a little bit of that, right? Just kind of looking at trends and studying consumers but that's if I could see into the future, that would be where I'd like to set a superpower.
What would the title of your first autobiography be?
Yeah. I appreciate you letting me think on this one a little bit. And I don't know if I've necessarily picked like found the perfect title, but it does go back to our conversation earlier. Like I think it's chasing the next big transformation, and the kind of the subtext that's under that is like a little bit. It's a mix of ambition, potential, and maybe a little bit of a chip on my shoulder that is the driver behind chasing. So that's where I sit.
It's so funny because as a friend and a fan of yours, hearing you even like mention a slight, like a desire to still want to be seen or achieve a certain thing. And I'm like, I'm exhausted. Like I was doing so much research around like everything you've been a part of and all the egos you've had to deal with and all of the amazing people and all of the unamazing people you've had to work with. The innovation that you've been a part of has revolutionized the way we will forever engage. And I think you are such this amazing person. So it's interesting to hear you. I actually think you're going to have multiple books, by the way. I think you would have
Thank
multiple
you.
books. And
Thank you.
I think that, because you are the blessing of all those things that they were talking about earlier. What was your first binge worthy show?
Gosh, first binge-worthy show.
Like, if we're coming on to like these social media or these media platforms,
Yeah.
like what was the first show that you were like, "Ah, thank God."
I mean, I will say going back to what was I'm forgetting the title of it from Netflix, the David Fincher show that they did as an original. I was like hooked.
Is this House of Cards?
Cards, I loved that. I absolutely loved it. Couldn't wait for more releases. But it's so funny when you ask that question. I think like of different periods of my life. Like, listen, if I could have gotten the Care Bears when I was like 6, I would have been like all over that. And then Saved by the Bell, right, and some of that. And then moving forward, what was the Degrassi High? I mean, I'm really dating myself with that one, but I am
That
an
that's
Xer,
fun.
and Degrassi High was like a real teen show, right? And Claire Danes was in that one, right?
She
Was
was
it Claire
in
Danes?
the other one with Jared Leto.
My So-Called Life.
That
My
was it.
So-Called Life. Love that
That
one,
also had
right?
one of the first teen gay characters that we were all
It did. It did.
amazingly.
And now when I get to go back, like, and there's a bunch of other shows, like I said, I could have done 90210 and otherwise. And now today, what's funny is I just go back when I am like in the mood for, when you just like, I just want some comfort TV, right? It's Golden Girls. It's, a Sex and the City episode. It's, something sitting in that genre that just gets me going.
Oh my God, I have been seeking out Three's Company lately. It gives
Great
me
one.
the
Great
feels.
one. Mr. Roper. Oh my gosh.
Did you have a favorite book or documentary that you tell everybody about?
Favorite book or documentary? So from a book, like I like absolutely love. There's two books that I always kind of absolutely love and recommend. One is Barbara Kingsolver's The Poisonwood Bible. It's in, I believe it's the Congo. It's been a while since I've reread it, but it's a book that is about a family that's leaving as the Belgians are leaving Africa and what's happening in the country. It's fictional, but it has the narrative of every family member, every chapter, and so you're getting a different perspective on what's happening through their various lenses, and I absolutely love that. I also love Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides. That's a phenomenal book. It's set in Detroit, transgender character. It's an incredible story. It's an incredible story. So those two are the book's perspective. And from a documentaries perspective, I was really lucky to be a part of so many documentaries at Discovery, working with John Hoffman, who was the head of documentaries there, and John Barden and Ali Moss, who were part of his team. I take tremendous pride in what we produce, whether that was working with Luis Hoyos on Racing Extinction, which was all about the Anthropocene and this mass extinction event we're seeing within animals and what we could do as individuals to contribute to its arrest, to movies on viruses. And then we even made, I mean, it was one of my favorite ones that we ever did. Uh, we did what we called a horror-mentary because we wanted to create this Halloween type series around documentaries. And we did one on rats with Morgan Spurlock, premiered it at the Toronto Film Festival. And it was, I mean, it's gross and gory, but it's still a great story about rats and culture of rats. And by the way, when you walk by any bit of trash in New York City, you should just stay as far away as possible because it's absolutely disgusting. But it's a great one to go watch if you're just kind of, want to see something very different.
Oh, I'll put that on around Halloween time. Okay, so last one. If you ran into your 18-year-old self and they learned where you're at right now, what do you think they would be most, or I guess because I probably told you, like, if you had a conversation with your 18-year-old self, what do you think you would say to them or they would say to you? But I just think you're so amazing. And I don't mean to over flatter you, but I just, thinking back to that 18-year-old, do you think that their mind would be blown with what you've been able to accomplish?
Yes. I mean, I think, listen, at 18, I was naive and probably had a very small view of the world, right? And it has been through my exposure with, friends and colleagues at university, VA and UCLA. It's been through career and career mentors that we've discussed that I've gotten to see the world. I mean, I've literally been to probably like 80 countries, and most of them because of work, right? I have friendships that sit across the globe, which I love, like the exchanges we have. And one of my best friends is Russian. She was literally born like a month before me, and we literally laugh all the time about the stories that Russians would tell their people and Americans would tell their people about what was going on and what life was like. But one of my closest, dearest friends at this moment in the world. So they'd be surprised by. And then I think honestly, like the fact that living in California for a number of years, going and pursuing something in media and tech, like, I think it's been, you know, I don't think my 25-year-old self would have been as surprised as my 18-year-old self. I think my 25-year-old self knew, found my own potential and was chasing it. But my 18-year-old self would have been very, very, very surprised.
I love this. I love this. I don't know what I haven't thought about that question because I think if she would be happy or disappointed.
You've got your own podcast. You'd
Yeah,
definitely
no,
be
she would be like,
impressed.
"How did this go?" And I'd be like, "Oh, so that person."
I think you answered your question though at the very beginning. You're happy with the person that sits in front of you earlier. You said it. You said, "I wouldn't change a thing,"
I
and
wouldn't do the thing.
that's happiness
I
and
think that
contentment.
she would have expected this different path, and I would have been like, it's better than that path, but it's just a different experience. This has been amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
We're gonna close this out. Just hold on one second. Thank you.